So you've probably heard of Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour, right? Well, today we're not just going to rehash the plot. We're going to use a special kind of analysis to peel back the layers and find the surprising, maybe even unsettling meaning hidden inside this classic story. I want to kick things off with a question that gets right to the core of it all. What if losing someone, an experience we're all told should be devastating, actually felt liberating? That's the shocking idea this story dares to explore. So how are we going to find these hidden meanings? We're using a tool called critical discourse analysis. Now, that sounds complicated, but it's really not. It just means we're looking beyond the words on the page. We're looking at the unspoken social rules and power structures of the time to really get what the story is trying to say. Okay, so to really get what's happening, we have to travel back in time to 19th century America. This was a world with some seriously rigid expectations, especially for women. And the story zooms in on one particular situation, widowhood, and what that actually meant for a woman's place in the world. So we meet our main character, Louise Millard. The whole story takes place in just 1 hour, right after she gets the terrible news that her husband has died in a train accident. The setup sounds pretty straightforward, but where her emotions go is anything but. Right from the get-go, the very first line tells us Mrs. Mallard has heart trouble. Now, on the surface, that's a physical condition, but it's also a fantastic bit of foreshadowing, a hint that her real problem isn't just physical, it's emotional, and that heart is going to be central to her fate. At first, everything plays out exactly how you'd think. Mrs. Mallard's reaction follows the social script for a new widow to a T. You could almost call it a performance of grief, one that everyone around her would expect and understand. And yup, there it is. The story says her grief is immediate. It's wild. It's this big, outward burst of emotion that perfectly fulfills her social role. She does exactly what a grieving wife is supposed to do. After that initial public display, she does the next socially acceptable thing. She goes to a room to be alone. From the outside, her behavior is a textbook example of a heartbroken wife. But what happens behind that closed door? Well, that's the story's big secret. And this is where everything changes. This is the moment the story just flips the script on us. Alone in a room, the predictable story of grief starts to completely unravel, and something much more shocking begins to bubble to the surface. She doesn't collapse in a heap of sorrow. Instead, she sinks into a comfy armchair and just looks out an open window. And what she sees out there has nothing to do with grief. The whole mood starts to shift. Instead of darkness, the story starts painting this picture of life. We hear about the new spring life in the trees, the delicious smell of rain, birds singing. This vibrant, living world is the complete opposite of the news of death, and it's a huge hint that something new is stirring inside her, too. And then it happens. The truth just slips out. It's a whisper, but it's powerful. The word she keeps repeating isn't about sadness or loss. It's free. And with that one word, everything we thought we knew about her grief is shattered. And there it is. That's the real battle in this story, isn't it? On one side, you have the social expectation, the sad, grieving widow. But on the other, you have her private reality, this sudden, stunning feeling of her own power, what the story calls a possession of self-assertion. She realizes that, yeah, she had loved her husband, sometimes, but this feeling of being her own person, of having a life that belongs only to her, she suddenly recognizes that as the strongest impulse of her being. I mean, for a woman in the 19th century, that is an incredibly radical thought. And get this, even she knows how shocking this feeling is. The story calls her joy monstrous. Why? Because she knows society would see it that way. It's a joy that comes from someone else's tragedy, and she's totally aware of how unacceptable that is. But this feeling doesn't just stay small. It starts to grow and grow, building to this incredible high. It's a triumphant moment for her, but as we're about to see, it's a triumph that just can't last when it collides with the real world. Her joy goes from that quiet whisper to a full-blown, feverish triumph. She starts dreaming about her future, all the years that will belong completely to her. This isn't just relief anymore, it's pure ecstasy. By the time she finally leaves her room, she's transformed. She doesn't look like a widow anymore. The story says she carries herself like a goddess of victory. It's like this joy has elevated her, made her something almost more than human. Now, here's a really interesting point from the analysis. Right at this moment, When her joy is at its absolute peak, the story kind of pushes us, the reader, away. Her emotion becomes so extreme, so godlike, that it's hard to relate to anymore. And that's on purpose. It sets us up for the crash.
And then, the final brutal twist. The front door opens, and her husband, Brentley, walks in, totally fine. Louise sees him, and she just collapses. When the doctors show up, they deliver that famous last line. Everyone thinks she died from the shock of joy. But we know the truth. She died from the shock of having that beautiful, free future ripped away in an instant.
So what are we supposed to make of that tragic ending? Well, the analysis suggests this story is more than just about a woman's struggle in the 19th century. It works on a bigger level, almost like a fable.
After that emotional roller coaster, what's the big takeaway here? Is it just about oppressive marriages, or is there something deeper going on?
The idea is that this story is ultimately a cautionary tale. It's not just about her circumstances, but about the danger of any emotion, even a good one like joy, becoming so powerful that it completely clouds our judgment. It's a warning about what can happen when we get so carried away that we lose touch with reality.
And that leaves us with a final question that feels just as relevant today as it did back then. At what point does our own happiness, our own personal triumph, become a danger? It's a powerful thought about that tricky balance between our feelings and our reason.